One of the biggest fake news ever published in the social media was about Pope Francis allegedly endorsing Trump for president in 2016. And yet, in spite of the fact that it was so obviously fake, it was passed on as a fact and shared as news by millions of Americans and may have helped Trump win the presidency. Today's first reading tells us that long before the age of social media, there had been already many instances of fake news being passed on as facts. St. Paul tells us that some letters were being passed around, allegedly written by Paul, but which he never wrote. The good thing is that the Thessalonian community at least bothered to do a fact check. It means they wrote Paul an earlier letter in order to verify. And now Paul is writing his second letter to the Thessalonians precisely to set the record straight. He says, and I quote, "Do not be alarmed by any report or by some letter said to be coming from us, saying that the second coming is near. Do not let yourselves be deceived in any way." And then he advises them to stand firm and hold on to the traditions that Paul and the other apostles had taught them by word or by letter. St. Paul is aware that not all tradition is worth keeping or passing on. He should know, because he was himself a Pharisee who was obsessed with traditions before he experienced his conversion. In today's gospel, Jesus is criticizing the Pharisees for their obsession with minute details about tradition. He points out how even the non-essential things can be handed down and imposed as heavy burdens on people. Jesus says, "You forget what is most important in the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness." Brothers and sisters, isn't this exactly what happens when people reduce religion to the observance of rituals and pietistic practices and never get to put their faith into practice or even consider its relevance to concrete issues in modern society, like human rights, human dignity, social justice, the politics of the common good, etc. In the letter of St. James, the apostle speaks not just about an irrelevant faith, but rather about dead faith. And St. John, in his own epistle, says, "We are liars if we claim to love God, the God we do not see, while we are unable to love the neighbor whom we see." And your neighbor is supposed to be the image and likeness of God. And St. Paul too says something to this effect. He says in 1 Corinthians 13, "Even if I can speak with the tongues of men and of angels, if I have no love, I am but a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have no love, I am nothing." the Jewish people have a tradition on the feast of the Passover, a tradition of ritualizing the meaning of the feast that they are celebrating with a meal, a dinner. And there is a part in the ritual meal when the father of the family engages his son in a dialogue. It begins with a question from the son. Father, what is the meaning of all of this? And then the father would explain by retelling the story of their liberation from Egypt. It is a beautiful example of what we call tradition, which comes from the Latin verb tradere, which means to hand down some practices from generation to generation. You know, the Latin verb has created two words in Italian that almost sound the same, but are very different in meaning. Traduttore and traditore. The first one, traduttore, means translate or to put in another language. The second one, traditore, means to betray or to become a traitor. You know, this Italian play of words should serve as a good warning to all of us about the function of tradition. While some of it is worth handing down because it gives light, we have to be careful about aspects of tradition that do not bring light, but rather darkness. Perhaps even the darkness of falsehood or treachery or betrayal in our lives.